Hello there all. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve. Up and onward we go. Today is a short and to me it's a very fun topic from Magick Without Tears. So we're going to tackle chapter 30. Do you believe in God? Let's dive into that. I'll preface my answer. Do I believe in God? One singular all-powerful being? No. I cannot accept the monotheistic dictator of reality as a fact. I hold that by mathematics, two polarities in union, equating to zero split apart into physical reality, allowing for matter to interact in space. I am guilty of using the term God for communication purposes, but often when I do so, I'm speaking from the point that all is this divine nothingness, but is incapable of personification. And this God is just the higher light of this physical realm. Light also being a metaphor, or an analogy, whatever you want to call that, not an actual light like photons. And now, insofar as other deities, angels, low spirits, what have you, I don't have need for belief. I've interacted with my fair share, and I understand the laws of the astral plane. All of these classes of, let's say, incarnate entities are astral plane representatives personified from the physical world principles they represent. Basically, one can fashion their own deity after some newly discovered principle of the universe, and in doing so, make that connection with the spiritual principle behind the physical world's object. I'm also going to begin the chapter with the postscript, as Crowley agrees with my sentiments on general classes of incorporeal beings. Quote, P.S. I thought it a good plan to put my fundamental position all by itself in a postscript, to frame it. My observation of the universe convinces me that there are beings of intelligence and power of a far higher quality than anything we can conceive of as human, that they are not necessarily based on the cerebral and nervous structures that we know, and that the one and only chance for mankind to advance as a whole is for individuals to make contact with such beings, capital B, end quote. So this postscript neglects God, but the chapter definitely covers that, so let's get into it. Quote, Cara Sora. True, we have gone over a great deal of the ground in various learned disquisitions of gods, angels, elves, et hoc genus omni. But God with a capital G, in the singular, is totally different pair of bluchers. Nicht wahr? End quote. Nicht wahr is like, not right? Question mark. Bluchers are, he said, totally different pair of bluchers. It's a pair of boots. It's German. So it's like, well, God versus capital G singular God, different pair of boots. We'll definitely talk more about all classes of these types of entities below God, quote unquote, as we continue along with Magick Without Tears. Eventually, in a later chapter, if memory serves me correctly, Crowley is going to simply call all incorporeal entities angels to classify them as lower than the Kabbalistic zero, which is that source of creation which has no personification. There is no God, period. There is just this and nothing. Let me briefly quote two passages from Liber 58, an essay upon number. Firstly, quote, 1. I am not God, I wish to become God. This is the Hindu's conception. I am Malkuth, I wish to become Kether. This is the Kabbalistic equivalent. 2. I am a fallen creature, I wish to be redeemed. This is the Christian conception. I am Malkuth, the fallen daughter. I wish to be set upon the throne of Binah, my supernal mother. This is the Kabbalistic equivalent. 3. I am the finite square. I wish to be one with the infinite circle. This is the unisectarian conception, or rather unsectarian conception. I am the cross of extension, I wish to be one with the infinite rose. This is the Kabbalistic equivalent. For the Kabbalist, Malkuth is in Kether, and Kether is in Malkuth, or that which is below is like that which is above, or simply Yod, the foundation of all letters, having the number 10 symbolizing Malkuth, end quote. And a second quote from Liber 58. The philosophical adept who, knowing God, says there is no God, meaning God is zero, as Kabbalistically he is. He holds atheism as a philosophical speculation as good as any other, and perhaps less likely to mislead mankind and do other practical damage as any other. Him you may know by his equanimity, enthusiasm, and devotion. I again refer to Liber 418 for an explanation of this mystery. The 9 religions are crowned by the ring of adepts whose password is, there is no God, so inflected that even the magister, when received among them, had not wisdom to interpret it, end quote. To simplify that, physical reality, again, is the splitting of polarities in union, resulting in division, thus manifestation and interaction. There is no difference between anything in the universe and God, because everything in this universe is all of that zero that's split apart. There's a positive and a negative. Positive 1 plus negative 1 equals 0. That's why we have masculine, feminine, we have, all of these dualities, object, subject. This is Liber Oz's most pertinent statement, quote, there is no God but man, end quote. Now, before I continue with the chapter, there is no God but man, it's saying that we've evolved like everything else in the universe, only we're conscious and we can interact with things, not just based on the laws of physical science, of physics, but consciously. So planets revolve around stars. It's an automatic process governed by laws of the universe. However, we can build things so that we could sort of counteract gravity if we choose to. We're conscious. We can guide our own evolution. So we are that Kabbalistic zero, one portion of that split duality, conscious of the fact of what that origin was and what we are now, and we can sort of guide our actions towards that higher purpose of experiencing reality, experiencing existence, causing changes to occur. And any change that occurs is going to have a whole series of outcomes as time goes on. So it's about, as a magician, being conscious of all of those facts, doing things that cause changes that are favorable to the whole. And you're not always going to take the whole into account. You're going to take your individuality, your nature into account. So if you just focus on that, if you look at the universe, let's say, as one big organism, what is your portion of responsibility as an individual cell operating in that body? Crowley continues, quote, let me go back just for a moment to the meaning of belief. We agreed that the word was senseless except as it implies an opinion, instinct, conviction, what you please, so firmly entrenched in our natures that we act automatically as if it were true and certain without error, perhaps even of the essence of truth. Good, the field is clear for inquiry into this word God. End quote. Here is the linguist adept at his finest. Already we see the word belief. Crowley is shredding the question to pieces. He defines what belief is and why people hold beliefs. So a belief is a default, ingrained opinion, what have you, conviction, that's ingrained into the individual. It's merely an opinion, at best a conviction. In any case, not grounded in intuition, but instilled in people to believe, in this case, in a supreme ruler of the universe. Were there evidence, were there verification, were there facts involved, belief would not be necessary. It would simply just be reality. You would know it. Quote, we must define, and to define is to limit, and to limit is to reduce God to a God, or at best, the God, end quote. The second you start putting labels on something, you bring it down below the abyss. And if it is below the abyss, it is indubitably not God. Quote, he must be omniscient, Mercury, omnipotent, sulfur, and omnipresent, salt. Yet to such a being no purpose would be possible, so that all the apologies for the existence of evil crash. If there be opposites of any kind, There can be no consistency. He cannot be two. He must be one. Yet, as is obvious, he isn't. End quote. Aha! God cannot be all these things, else everything is by proxy automaton. And further, this God cannot be all good because he is there and of the evils that happen. So the Christian argument falls apart. Already this thing which is supposedly one has a dual nature of opposites. Here Crowley equates the three alchemical principles with these characteristics commonly attributed to what the layman calls God. Omniscient, all-knowing, to Mercury. That makes sense. It's of a mental correspondence. Omnipotent, all-powerful, to Sulfur for a fiery correspondence, much like Geborah's fiery nature of power. And omnipresent, everywhere. He attributes that to Salt for the physical bodily aspect. These three primarily correspond with the supernal triad, Mercury to Kether, Sulfur to Chakma, Salt to Binah, but can also encompass the three mother letters, and thus the elements of the three pillars of the tree of life. Moving on, quote, how do the Hindu philosophers try to get out of this quag? Evil is illusion, has no real existence. Then what is the point of it? They say, not that, denying to him all attributes. He is that which is without quantity or quality. They contradict themselves at every turn. Seeking to remove limit, they remove definition. Their only refuge is in superconsciousness. Splendid. But now belief has disappeared altogether, for the word has no sense unless it is subject to the laws of normal thought. Tut. You must be feeling it yourself. The further one goes, the darker the path. All I have written is somehow muddled and obscured. Maugre my frenzied struggle for lucidity, simplicity. End quote. So not that. What he's just said in the quote, they're removing qualities to remove these limitations to define something, but if you remove all qualities, you inevitably arrive at nothing. So from here, Crowley recounts thinking that maybe he's just overthinking the whole thing. He's relying too much on his training, which could lead to some unbeknownst indoctrination or bias. He came up with the idea, and he went and asked his masseuse, since he considered her religiously unstudied, and he thinks that she would be a good layman test subject to pose the question, do you believe in God, and why? What is it? I'll just quote snippets, as I think we've already sufficiently covered this subject, and she ultimately arrives at the same conclusions we've already stated in this video. Does she believe in God? Quote, her reply was quickly yes. I said, of course, but suppose you think it over, and out a bit, what am I to understand? She began glibly, he is a great big, and broke off looking foolish. Then, although omnipotent, he needed our help. We were all just as powerful as he, for we were little bits of each other. But exactly how or to what end she did not make clear. She went on without a word from me for a long while, tying herself up into fresh knots with every phrase. She became irreverent, then downright blasphemous, stopped short and began to laugh at herself. In the end, curiouser and curiouser, she arrived at practically identical conclusion. She believed, but what she believed in was nothing. End quote. Now, much of the conversation is omitted, if assuming the conversation ever took place to begin with, but ultimately describing some infinite, meaning in a state of singularity, describing this thing has no features, and therefore you inevitably end up describing a non-existent being, therefore zero. Quote, as to our old criterion of what we imply in practice when we say that we believe, she began by saying that if we helped God in his mysterious plan, he would in some fashion or other look after us. But about this she was even more vague than in the matter of intellectual conviction. Helping God meant behaving decently according to one's own instinctive ideas of what decently means. It is very encouraging that she should have seen, without any prompting on my part, to what a muddle the question necessarily led. And very nice for me because it lets me out. Cara Sora. End quote. Love is the law. Love under will. See y'all in the next one.